Hello, and welcome to LexArt Inspires, our ongoing series of conversations with artists about life and the creative spark. I'm Wayne Davis, your host and Interim Executive Director of LexArt, the Lexington Arts and Crafts Society. Join us the third Thursday each month for LexArt Inspires, our hunt for inspiration and creativity, that perpetual quest artists have pursued across diverse forms of expression from ancient times to the modern day. Tonight, we'll explore some primal themes that have animated all great art: love, family, life, death, and immortality. How did artists 2,000 years ago, and how did contemporary artists meet the challenge of finding new ways to address those timeless topics? Our two guides on tonight's journey are Melinda Lopez and Matthew Siegel. Melinda Lopez has what she calls an evil plan: put complex, flawed, and astonishing women center stage. She is a playwright, actress, and educator. Melinda is currently the first Mellon playwright in residence at Boston's Huntington Theater Company. She teaches theater and performance at Wellesley College and playwriting at Boston University. And as you'll hear more tonight, Melinda is active in the Cuban American community. Her partner in tonight's conversation and in life is Matthew Siegel. Let's let Melinda introduce Matthew and kick off the conversation.
So by way of introduction for his wonderful talk, these are some things I can tell you about him. These are some jobs he has had before coming to LexArt, which you may want to reconsider some of the decisions you've made recently. He's currently the head of conservation at the Museum of Fine Arts, but he has been a bartender, a hot air balloon guide, a concert promoter and roadie, a glassblower. He sold jewelry and his artwork on the streets of San Francisco, worked on a ranch roping cattle. He has inoculated chickens and has worked also in art shipping and art museums, art admin for over 30 years. He's installed museum exhibitions on over 5 continents. He would have been in Australia this spring, if not for COVID. That would have been 6. And I don't know if they have art in Antarctica, but if they do, he is the guy to set up the show there. These are some other things you should know about him. He has really good eyesight and can identify every kind of bird. He has logged hundreds of miles walking in canyons in the American Southwest. He has gotten frostbite and been struck by lightning. He's bribed Russian officials with French champagne and also numerous interactions with brown bears. He is a loyal friend and an adventurous diner. He has lived in his car. He obsessively saves all his receipts. He is incapable of dishonesty, is a very early riser, and has never missed an anniversary, which for some of us that matters. Just quickly before you start, what is the weirdest museum work you have ever done?
I traveled an exhibition with a work by a Mexican artist named Sylvia Gruner at the height of the AIDS epidemic, which was 200 glass pipettes strung together in a line on the wall that were filled with blood. We used chicken blood the first time we did it, but at each successive venue, I would have to call ahead to the museum and ask them if they would go to the local slaughterhouse and get me a gallon of fresh blood so that I could fill the 200 glass pipettes. It was actually a beautiful object, which I very much enjoyed traveling.
See, Wayne, you want to rethink this. I also remember seeing a piece with a pool of motor oil in the ICA. That was another one that I remember. That's probably enough by way of introduction. Shall I
Okay.
ask you one more question?
Okay.
Okay. What are you proud of?
I'm proud of the way that I've lived my life. I'm proud of my wife. I'm proud of my daughter and my extended family in general, of the work that I've done, of my community, of my faith, of my political party,
Okay,
to name a few.
that's awesome. All right. I think you are going to talk to us about some of your favorite pieces.
I am. A few of my favorite objects at the MFA, after 19 years at the MFA. Before I start the presentation, I wish to state that I am not an art historian. I'm a collections manager, a caretaker. I am responsible for the physical care of the MFA collection, conservation, repair, restoration, handling, mounting. My relationship and my access to artworks is to and through their physical properties. Handling, mounting, repairing, conserving are all actions that require the laying of hands on the objects. By doing so, by working on them and by living with them day to day, they reveal themselves. They have stories and secrets to tell about their use, their histories, their manufacture, and the people that made them. Caring for objects also teaches one to look closely and to trust in what one sees. The MFA acquired this early 12th century painted limestone sculpture of a seated Madonna and Child by an unknown master in 1957. Here, pictured in its setting in the museum, the Lombardy Madonna, as we refer to her, sits in front of a Byzantine chapel from Catalan, Spain. Out of all the magnificent works of art in the MFA collection, this is the one that I return to most often. There are so many extraordinary aspects to this work of art that I'll try and touch upon, but I'll begin by stating that I return to her because she never fails to remind me of why I do what I do. Setting the art historical context aside for a moment, you have to be struck by the sheer emotional power and intimacy that these figures convey. Their intimacy draws you in and becomes your intimacy. The masterful rendering of their features, the child adoring and beseeching, the mother prescient in her sorrow, yet comforting and consolatory to the child. Their exaggerated, elongated features amplify their expressiveness. Their arms, longer than their legs, envelop one another in incredibly tender embrace. The figures gaze into one another's eyes, the Madonna's head lowered to meet the upraised face of the child, their matching downturned lips almost touching. The tiny negative space between their faces is mesmerizing, and the thought of the stone carver's hammer and chisel bringing this from the stone is remarkable. If the power and emotional force weren't captivating enough, the sculptor has sought to offset the solemnity of the piece with a not so understated playfulness. The child, for the most part, is not the commonly represented infant. I don't think that the artist could have achieved the expressiveness he sought in the face of an infant, nor could the limbs of mother and an infant be so thoroughly entwined. The artist needed the palette of a child's larger hands to convey the tenderness of touch. But the child is mature from the waist up only. He has tiny legs and little baby's feet, as well as an uplifted shirt revealing an infant's large round belly.
His little belly.
Naturalism and humanism are rare for this period of time, heavily influenced by Byzantine art. Most works were two-dimensional and highly symbolic, like the Madonna and Child pictured here. There's no interest or attempt whatsoever to represent the garment of the child realistically. It's highly stylized, looking at the folds um, of the drapery, and except for the tiny hand of the child up here, which you can hardly see, there isn't really an attempt to represent any kind of embrace either. Other works of the period are even cartoon-like, like the chapel wall that's behind the Madonna and Child. All those works are of the same time period. Also rare is for a stone object, and one of this age, to retain so much of its original pigment. It was heavily overpainted at some point, and this served to protect the original paint layer from wear. Stunningly, for a 12th century piece most likely commissioned for or by the church and made for an altar, there is no religious iconography. No cues, no gilt or gold, no halos, no crosses. They're not lost or missing. They were quite purposefully never there. This is a peasant mother and child sharing a captured moment of love and loss that we bear witness to. It is masterful in its conception as well as its execution. All is made that much more powerful by the execution of the work in stone and in the round. I don't believe that the piece could have the power, the forcefulness, or the gravitas it does if it was two-dimensional or carved in relief, made of wood or clay. It's rare for a sculpture of this time period to be made in the round, to be made to stand independent of an architectural setting. Hans Swarensky, the curator responsible for acquiring the piece in 1957, succeeded in tracing its origins several years later. He claimed the work to be of an unknown master of Lombardy, stylistically closely related to the artist who created this work, Benedetto Antalami, the leading sculptor of Parma, active from 1175 to 1227. Swarensky thought Antalami was perhaps our master's pupil. The stylistic comparison is apparent particularly in Mary's complicated drapery, wrapped around her head, shoulders, and arms, and spreading across her legs in linear patterns, and falling into sharp folds at the hem of her garment. This caused Swarensky to search the area surrounding Parma, where he found an even closer stylistic comparison in the small town of Castella Acquato outside of Piacenza. Here's the town of Castella Acquato, a medieval town. Here is the parish church. This is the tympanum over the entranceway to the church of a Madonna and Child with an angel and St. Peter. This is the tympanum over the door, and you can see several things. One, in both the proportions of the Madonna's head, as well as the aspect of her head, leaning towards the child, and also of her head wrap falling over her shoulder and exposed here in exactly the same way that the head wrap is here on our Lombardy Madonna. And this caused Swarensky, this stylistic comparison caused Swarensky to place our Lombardy Madonna here in the church of Castella Acquato. This is the interior of the church, Romanesque, beautiful Romanesque church looking towards the altar. And this is the altar that the Swarensky believes that our Lombardy Madonna was carved for. It's now generally accepted that the Madonna was carved for the altar of the Castella Acquato Paris church. But later in the 1990s, an Italian art historian, Arturo Carlo Quintaval, drew comparisons to works by two known artists, both from Piacenza, further lending credence to Swarensky's placement of the Madonna in Castella Acquato. This is a relief by the artist Niccolo to take a look at the folds and the heart-shaped fold in the drapery at the bottom here, which exactly matches the folds in the drapery of the relief by Niccolo. And this is a caryatid by another artist from Piacenza, Willy Gelmis, which is in the collection of Castello Sforzesco in Milan. And looking around Another sculpture that was carved in around, looking around the sculpture, you can see some very close stylistic comparisons. So between Antelamo in Parma and Niccolò and Willigelmus in Piacenza, Castello Quarto falls directly between them. Further, this is the back of Willigelmo's caryatid, showing some very close comparisons to the Lombardy Madonna, both in sort of the massing of the stone, as well as the representation of the drapery. What I think about when communing with this work of art after giving over to its power, its emotional intensity, and its virtuosity is the voice of the artist. This person was so far ahead of their time in so many aspects of this work. They had to be highly conscious of the artistic choices they were making, highly aware of what those choices conveyed, and highly aware of their voice as an individual, as an artist. And that was in the early 12th century. The second object I'd like to talk about is also Italian, also a sculpture of two figures in stone. It is an Etruscan husband and wife sarcophagus. The Etruscans flourished in Italy for a period of about 900 years, from 900 BC to 27 BC, when they were completely subsumed by the Roman Empire. The Etruscan civilization coincided and existed closely with the ancient Greeks. They, however, have a unique artistic style, quite distinguishable from the Greeks. Instead of frozen poses like their Greek counterparts, with glances off into the distance, Etruscan sculpture is marked by relaxed poses, directness, and even vivacity. These are the Riaci warriors, pair of Greek bronzes on the left as compared to the Mars of Todi and Etruscan bronze on the right. The Etruscans are the only civilization that we know of that produced husband and wife sarcophagus and interred couples together. This in keeping with what we understand to be women's equal place in Etruscan society. We know this because many writers in Greek and Latin commented on it as scandalous, especially the practice of men and women banqueting together. The sarcophagus dates from 300 to 400 BC and was found as one of a pair in Volci, in central Italy. It bears an inscription that identifies it as the coffin of Ramcha Vishne, the wife of Arnth Tetnes. The second sarcophagus on the left was of their son and his wife. The Tetnes sarcophagus was unearthed in March 1846 in the Ponte Romo necropolis of Volci, a wealthy Etruscan settlement of the 6th to 4th century BC. The necropolis itself had been discovered in 1828 when a team of plowing oxen lost their footing and fell into one of the tombs. Many archaeological sites and finds are discovered in just such a haphazard way. The necropolis was part of an estate that Pope Pius VII had awarded to Lucien Bonaparte, the brother of Napoleon I. Lucian recognized the financial opportunities of bringing Etruscan antiquities to the burgeoning European art market and led mercenary excavations at Volci. But he passed, and it was his widow, Princess Alexandrine de Bléchamp, who discovered the fabulous Tetnes sarcophagus. She attempted to sell it to the Papal States on several occasions, but failed to reach an agreement on price. Decades later, still in the possession of the Lucien Bonaparte estate, Napoleon III had planned to purchase the sarcophagus for the Louvre, a plan thwarted by his capture at the Battle of Sedan in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. By 1883, the sarcophagus were in the possession of a James Jarvis Jackson, a diplomat and art critic resident in Florence. Jarvis brought them back to Boston that same year, 1883, for an exhibition of foreign products and arts at Mechanics Hall. 3 years later, the sarcophagus of the Tetnes son was sold to the MFA. And in my opinion, the better one, on the right, was sold to the Boston Athenaeum. But the Athenaeum work went on loan to the MFA the following year in 1887 and remained there until it too was purchased by the museum in 1975. Here are both the sarcophagus pictured in a 19th century photograph in the original location in the Museum of Fine Arts in Copley Square. And here are the two sarcophagus, again side by side, in the Etruscan Gallery at the present MFA location at 465 Huntington Avenue. Similar to the Madonna, this piece is exceptional for its naturalism, its tenderness, its overall emotional content, and the artist's mastery. There is no object of its kind equal to this anywhere. The couple lie together, embracing one another under a sheet with their bare feet hanging out. They're rendered with such immediacy. Their warmth and love for one another is palpable when in their presence. To understand just how exceptional this object is, we need to look at other examples of the same. The first example is from the Louvre. This one, Napoleon III did succeed in acquiring for the Louvre in 1861. Found in Civiteri, it's several hundred years earlier than the Tetny sarcophagus, made of painted terracotta with a great deal of original paint. This sarcophagus is lovely, showing the couple reclining together, smiling, likely exchanging wine and perfume, part of the funerary ritual. It is, however, highly stylized and rather stiff. The second example, also from Civiteri, from the collection of the Villa Giulia in Rome, is a masterpiece by any measure. Strikingly similar in pose to the Louvre piece, it may have been produced by the same workshop. Although still highly stylized and idealized, it's beautifully executed, incredibly graceful, and a prized sculpture of any age. The last example is a stone sarcophagus found together with our featured piece of the Tetny son and his wife. Since these works are so close in form, they give us the best indication of how special the sarcophagus on the right is. Both of the Tetny sarcophagus are far advanced to the previous two examples in terms of naturalism and representational sculpture. The sarcophagus on the left of the Tetny son and his wife is a fantastic object that any museum in the world would die to have, but standing in its presence does not move me to tears, as the one on the right. And the one on the left is the one, inexplicably, that the MFA curators chose to get back on view first after conservation and remounting. While the couple on the left would seem to share the same pose as the couple on the right, their embrace looks more like an awkward couple learning to dance than the close and tender embrace on the right. While their sheet is pulled down to their waists to reveal their nakedness beneath, it looks like the couple is inside a burlap sack or being unwrapped as a Christmas present, as opposed to the closeness of the bedding on the right, revealing the figures beneath, especially their lower legs, as compared to the figures on the right. The sheet pulled up higher on the figures on the right, covering the husband's left arm, adds to the closeness and intimacy of the couple, as does the volume of the pillow, which tilts their heads towards us and each other. The exposed feet of the couple on the right, besides adding to the tenderness of the figures, is a playful addition and acts as a framing device of the composition, along with the upraised pillow at the head and the gathered sheet behind the knees. Although the sculpture on the left is made of travertine, a fine-grained stone capable of yielding great detail as seen in the hair, the artist on the right, even though working with a crude, coarse, volcanic tuff, is able to convey astounding individuality, immediacy, and warmth. The Romans are generally recognized as producing the first real portraiture. The Greeks sculpted archetypes, idealized strength, beauty, wisdom, fertility, and in the case of Dionysus, revelry. But the Romans sculpted portraits of men with wrinkles, pits, and warts. Certainly this artist produced portraits of his subject. Think back to the highly stylized terracotta sarcophagus we saw earlier. These are portraits. I'm particularly fond of Mr. Tetney's double chin. The fact that he's represented in his middle-aged weightiness. Most of all, what distinguishes the work on the right is the couple's gaze. The couple on the left look directly at each other in a wholly static composition. On the right, Ramcha gazes tenderly at her husband Arndt, while he has a three-quarter aspect, looking partially back at her and partially gazing off elsewhere. I find this devastatingly profound, and is what I mean when I talk about artist voices and artist choices. This was a choice that speaks with understanding and eloquence through 2,000 years. The side of the sarcophagus shows a ceremony, likely the couple's reunion in the afterlife. They clasp hands in the center, or more precisely, he places his hand around her wrist. On the left end, two women, a parasol over their heads, ride in a cart drawn by two mules, driven by a male attendant. A winged spirit of death waves two snakes at them. The husband Arndt wears the Greek himation, the cloak, suggesting that he is the heroized deceased, leading his wife to the underworld. She may have survived him to have her own separate procession on the left end, and the scene on the side that this detail is from, thus may be taken as a symbolic marriage ceremony, the union with death and life in the underworld, rather than merely in life on earth. So the couple embraces for all eternity, in life, in death, and in art. I wanted to show you a couple of pictures of us working on the sarcophagus. Here we are lifting the lid off of the Tetney sarcophagus, probably for the first time in at least 150 years. And here we are picking up the base of the Sun sarcophagus to be placed on its new mount, closer to us in the image. And you can see the lids, the bases of the two sarcophagus in the background, and the lids of each sarcophagus in the foreground. The son and his wife on the left, and Arndt and Vishnu on the right. I find the piece incredibly moving, and the fact that they are embracing for eternity. Thank you. All right.
That was amazing.
That's me. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was profoundly beautiful.
Your turn.
So the format of the pitch to y'all to be here has to do with us being married and working in different fields in the arts, and we are husband and wife, but we also work in these disparate fields. So I'm in work in the theater, and I picked a couple of selections of theater pieces that I thought resonated with the Lombardy Madonna and the sarcophagus that Matthew selected. So I thought I would talk a little bit about what I do and how I understand theater operating in the world, and also in particular at this moment. Wayne, I think as you so articulated so well, how do we do this? How do we inspire creativity through this pandemic, this double pandemic moment?
All right.
Did you want to say anything? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got
I got
to introduce me.
Yes. Okay.
With some razzing.
How is that razzing? None of that was razzing. It was all true. The chickens, it's all true.
So I met you because I saw you on stage in a Craig Lucas play, Blue Window, in Boston. I had no idea that you grew up down the street from me and that we were from the same hometown.
Yes, that's right.
I saw you on stage and I was smitten.
You were smoked.
I was, and at the time, you were a performer, not a writer, and you were performing a sort of in a number of areas which I had trouble that were incongruous in my mind. You were out at Shakespeare and Company as Kate in the lead of Taming of the Shrew at the same time that you were doing stand-up improv comedy.
Yes, from the sublime to the ridiculous. Yes, that's for sure.
And I dragged you out to Minneapolis, where I had a job, but you did not. And you continued to do improv comedy out there for free for the Dudley Riggs comedy troupe. And you also were a stagehand at the Mixed Blood Theater Company, I think also for free. No, you were getting paid? But there was a playwriting workshop in Minnesota that you found out about, and you applied to them, and they accepted you. And you wrote a piece as part of your playwriting fellowship called The Order of Things. And The Order of Things was recognized, was noticed by the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., the National Center for Performing Arts, where they gave you the first ever award as a promising new voice in American theater.
Yes, the Charlotte Woolard Award, named after a prominent donor there. Yeah.
And it's basically the rags to the Horatio Alger, is that it? The rags to riches story. But I wonder if you might like to comment, one, about the play, your very first piece that you ever wrote, The Order of Things, and two, about that experience of getting catapulted into the world of playwriting.
I was a performer. I've been in love with the theater since I was a kid, and got my advanced training as an actress, and had an understanding of what happens inside a play, because when you're an actor, you gotta land this thing. Something has to happen in the scene to get to the next point. There's an architecture that you begin to understand because you're inside the house of the play. And while I was in Minneapolis, I was doing a lot of staged readings for new plays, because part of the development process is you write a play, but you haven't heard it. You need to give it to actors. It doesn't exist, right? But like the stone there's no sculpture until the sculptor comes and removes the stone, right? That's like what a playwright does. They put words on the page, but it's not alive until an actor reads it. And so in Minneapolis, I was doing a lot of play readings for free. Thank you. I know, fine, whatever. And I really enjoyed the process, talking about, why is this a play? What happens in it that makes it a play? And I literally just thought one day, wow, I'm offering so much attention to support someone else's artistic vision. Do I have a vision? Because I didn't know. And that was when I had the opportunity to take this class at the Playwrights Center, which is a great institution in Minnesota that is all about developing new artists for the theater. I didn't know what I had to say. I didn't know if I had anything to say, but I was curious. And I think that just that difference matters, because plays are about questions, or not about answers. That at the heart of every play, there is a question that the playwright is grappling with, and hopefully the audience is engaged in. And what I came to discover was I had a lot to say about my ethnic background, my cultural background, my family. And so this whole, I'm this Cuban American kid who grew up in Bedford, Massachusetts. And I studied the American Revolution in school, but when I was called upon to imagine what I would put on stage, it was all Cuba. And so it was new. I didn't know that. And that's kind of been a thread that I have followed with my work. Because
so let's talk about that a little. Your parents were part of the Cuban diaspora, and you ended up in Bedford. Bedford, Massachusetts.
That's where they ended up.
They ended up in Bedford, Massachusetts.
They settled. No, they love it here. They love the winter.
But the Cuban diaspora seems to be a wound that you have that will not heal.
Yes, I think that is fair.
You grew up in the house hearing stories which must have seemed like fairy tales of a magical land, a far off magical land that you never knew.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can talk about how that affected you and how that may have, prompted your desire to tell stories as well.
Sometimes people ask me, gee, I'm interested in writing. How do I start writing? And what worked for me was I started telling stories that I already knew, because plot is very hard. Like, what happens next is very hard. And if you can take a family legend or a mythology from your own life and figure out how you're going to tell that story, that might be a way to start writing. And so I had this wealth of unlived experience, right? Of generational experience that was passed down to me, that was handed to me by crazy, I think maybe we all feel like our ancestors had really interesting lives, but my family had really interesting lives. I draw from their lives and their experience and their way of understanding the world a lot. I like to write about history. I like to talk about why things end up happening the way they do. I like to draw on hidden psychology, things that are not articulated in a family, secrets and things that come back later that have a kind of dramatic arc. I'll also say like 2 words about this gauze that's put over any play that's written by a person from a Latinx community, which is magical realism. Mm-hmm. Like, I've been rereading Garcia Marquez, and I read Garcia Marquez and I think that's actually all fact. That's what Colombia is like. Butterflies come and, choke you, and beautiful people get carried away, like into the sky. I'm going to read from one of my favorite plays, Marisol by Jose Rivera, where he wrote this play in 1996, and everyone said, it's magical realism, it's magical realism. And actually everything in this play has come to pass. And so I think it's a way of being open to the miraculous in the everyday. If that's magic, that's fine. But my experience of, say, my parents' lives and my grandparents' lives and my great-grandparents' lives and is so rich and offers such opportunity for thrilling theater. I think theater should be not boring, and it should be make you want to lean forward and say, I want to get to know these people a little better. So
are you going to read for us?
Yeah. Thank you for asking about that. And it's very, very much informed. I also draw on Bedford, by the way. I write a lot of plays that are inspired by Bedford. And I have a rock musical about kids trying to get out of Bedford, except it's not Bedford, it's Gary, Indiana, but whatever. So I feel very much a suburban kid, a suburban Gen X kid right? Trying to make sense of the world, the same way that I feel that I'm a lost, a member of a lost tribe trying to get home,
Mm-hmm.
right? That my longing for a homeland that I don't know as well as I wish I did. I'm gonna offer up.
We get out of the camera.
First of all, I'm gonna play this quick video. So, and I know we're running, the clock is running, and I know we want to leave time for Q&A. So I'll just say very briefly, the plays that I write tend to draw on intensely personal experiences. I mean, right, your personhood is in your work, whether you're a baker or an artist. So that's not unusual. But probably the most personal piece I have developed was drawing very, very literally on the experience of being a caretaker for my parents when they were towards the end of life. My parents lived with us until they were in their 90s. And through my mother's end-of-life care, like many people who are caught between raising children and caring for parents, I found myself overwhelmed. It was very difficult to write, and all I could do was make notes on a cell phone, occasionally at doctor's appointments and thus and such. And so, but I felt important to remember the specific experience. I didn't want to forget what was happening. And I knew that memory is a deadener. Time softens the edges of experience. And it felt important with this experience that I wanted to remember it precisely, the good and the bad. And so I came later to write a play called Mala, which is based on my experience with me and my mother. I created a solo performance, a solo show, which I have performed numerous times. I've done it in a bunch of different cities. I've probably performed the show about 100 times. It's gotten to the point where Mala feels like a character who is not me. Because like writing a thing and then performing a thing, it's different, right? Plays have rules and you need to accomplish things in plays. It's also been done without me, with a different actress in Oregon on the West Coast. So that the play ran with someone else playing me. As part of pandemic theater, the publisher, Dramatist Play Service, reached out to many playwrights and said, would you please read from your work? And we can make this archive available to people who would like to see people much more interesting than me reading from their plays. So I recorded, it's about a 3.5-minute section of my play Mala for Dramatist Play Service. And I will also put the link to the website in the chat, and you can go there and you can see probably other playwrights that you have heard of, and if you wish to hear them reading from their work. But I am going to just show right now the clip that I recorded for Dramatist Play Service. Again, it's me at the kitchen table. It's very low tech. And it's about a 3.5-minute selection from Mala, and it's just a little easier than me reading it for you now. So as long as I can share screen again, I'm going to do that, and that will give you an idea both of the work that I do, but also pandemic theater. So I'm going to share my screen.
Hi, I'm Melinda Lopez, and I'm going to read a short section from my has fallen and refused to go to the hospital, and Mala has made her go. Mala means bad, but more than bad. It means your essential self is bad. Not that you've done something bad, but that you are in your core bad. So 2 days before I went over to check on her, I checked on her 3 or 19 times a day. I bring her meals, I make sure she has what she needs. Sometimes Annie is there, sometimes she's just left, or sometimes I have 5 minutes between caring for my daughter, walking the dog, working from the office, working from home, getting dinner on the table. And I'm not complaining, I'm just saying, I'm just painting a picture. Sometimes I have 5 minutes. And I think, well, maybe I'll just pop in on a 92-year-old lady and see how I can ruin the rest of my day. And some of you, let me just acknowledge right off the bat, some of you might be wondering, how did it come to be that my 92-year-old mother lives with me instead of being in a nursing home where obviously she belongs? And I will just say, we're Cuban, which in a way explains it. But if you're still wondering, I will add, I guess, I'm the younger daughter. And it's not like the Middle Ages. I mean, we break with tradition all the time. We live in Massachusetts. They left behind their families in the old country. But you know, sometimes in life, you have to choose your battles. And in my life, I've had a lot of battles with my parents. To start, over the course of my adulthood, I brought home 4 different guys, all of whom were the one. 3 were Jewish and 1 was a ginger, which less said about that, the better. But in the end, this particular battle just seemed inevitable. No, welcome. I'm ready. I signed on. Not like I didn't sign on. That's what the good daughter does. So, at the hospital, she gets test after test after test, and needles and poking, and can't sleep because someone's measuring some vital function every 2 hours. There's nothing wrong with her brain, nothing wrong with her blood pressure, her kidney function. She doesn't have a UTI, no infection, no mini stroke. She's old. Went to the hospital for being old. She asks, ¿Quién soy yo? ¿De dónde vengo yo? She picks at her food. You know who you are. Sí, pero algo me falta. No sé quién soy. Carrots and potatoes on the fork. Later, she asks about my father. ¿Dónde está? Mommy, you know where Poppy is. I can't bear to tell her if she doesn't remember. When I leave, I give her a kiss and promise to come back tomorrow. And she takes my hand and she pulls me close. And she whispers in my ear, "Those pants make you look like a man." That was a selection from Mala. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening. Stay safe.
So, so that's one short selection from some of my work. I don't generally perform my own work. I really dislike performing in my own work. I think it's really important to get the input of other actors, directors. I feel like once you write a play, you sort of said everything you have to say, and what you need now is the collaborative experience of working with a number of different artists, the designers, the set, the costumes, all of those things. But with Mala, that was how it turned out. Plays have their own rules and they ask for things and you have to feed them or they get angry and then become boring and bad. Mala was also recorded by WGBH. They did a beautiful recording of the performance that I did at the Huntington Theater, and that was available to stream in the early months of the pandemic. It streamed for most of the month of April. And I think it might come back in the fall. Wayne, you can help me let people know if it becomes available again. But the play has a lot of magic in it. It has an ice flow and northern lights and some mythology, etc. Yes, you're pointing at me. I'm gonna read. Oh, so sorry if I didn't say that was mother-daughter, right? Mother-daughter, parent-child, the whole thing. Lombardy Madonna, parent-child. So I selected Mala because it was parent-child. Now I'm going to read from a play that I love dearly, and this is has to do with end of like People, I don't know. Why are you on we're about to have our 25th wedding anniversary. I'm just saying, 25th wedding anniversary on October 1st. And this is all sarcophagus and couples dead in tombs. So I don't know what's going on with that. But the experience of confronting mortality made me think of one of my favorite plays, Marisol. So Marisol is a wonderful play by Jose Rivera, who is a Puerto Rican playwright who gets accused of being magically real all the time. Marisol is not a brand new play. It's from 1996. And in this play, okay, when Matthew and I talk about theater, we talk about art, we say, why this piece, why now, and why me? So why this piece from 1996 speaks so strongly to the current moment. In the play, Marisol is a Puerto Rican yuppie American princess working in New York City. She works at a publishing firm, and one night her guardian angel comes to her and tells her that that guardian angel can no longer protect her because God has grown senile, and the only way to right the world is for the guardian angels to go to war against God. That is how they're going to fix the world. But in the meantime, it means that all humans are without their guardian angel. And so Marisol needs to take care of herself. Terrible things have been happening. There's a lot of climate change. The moon has disappeared, and the first act is somewhat normal. Marisol is almost attacked by a golf club wielding man on the subway. But she gets away, and she goes into work the next day. And she meets her best friend, June. I'm going to read a short scene that happens at the publishing firm while Marisol and June are talking, and I'll just set up the end of the piece, which is really where I want to get to. But I want you to really listen to the language and the way that Jose Rivera coins these phrases. And like all a playwright has is words. Like all the other stuff, we tend to think of theater, which is the performances, the lights, all that stuff. That's not what a playwright does. A playwright just gives you a text. So I'm going to read this very briefly, how he paints the world that they're living in. This is when the play is normal, because the second act gets whack. So Marisol comes into work. And June asks her, I'll read a little bit of June. June asks her, something wrong with you today? You look like SHIT, Miss Puerto Rican Yuppie Princess of the Universe. You never look like SHIT. And Marisol says, it's nothing. Let's get to work. If I don't get this manuscript off my desk. And June asks, something happened to you last night? No, it's nothing. It's my body. It feels like it fits into my clothes all wrong today. Every person on the subway gave me the shivers. They all looked hungry. I kept hearing children crying. I kept smelling burnt flesh. And now there's a woman with my exact name killed on my exact street last night. And I had this dream that this winged woman, a black angel with beautiful wings, and she came to my bed and said she loved me. And she seemed so real, so absolute, so virtuous and powerful, incapable of lying, exalted, sublime, radiant, pure, perfect, fulgent. Fulgent? Oh, Marisol, that didn't happen. You dreamed it. It's some Roman Catholic bullcrap. Oh, now I feel sorry. I feel sorry for everything. And then June says, I think your dream is like the moon disappearing. It's all a lot of pre-millennium jitters. I've never seen so much nervousness. It's still up there, but paranoia has clouded our view. That shit can happen, you know. Marisol, I don't think the moon's disappearance is psychological. It's like the universe is senile, June. like we're at the part of history where everything breaks down. Do you smell smoke? What is it? It's 9:30. We're expecting the smoke from that massive fire in Ohio to reach New York by 9:30. They smell. Jesus, those are millions of trees burning. You can smell the polyester, the burnt malls, the defaulted loans, the unemployment, the flat vowels. Lights begin to go up. Marisol and June stand at the window and watch the smoke drift towards Europe. Silence. They look at each other. The whole thing strikes them as absurd. Ah, fuck it. I'm going on break. You want something from downstairs? Coffee? I'm going for coffee. Coffee's extinct, June. Tea. I meant tea. Tea. I hate tea. I swear, one more natural cataclysm like that and I'm going home. So after this, there's a number of events. June gets hit in the head by a Nazi skinhead and loses her memory. And Marisol has to travel from the Bronx to Brooklyn to save her friend. Over the course of this journey, the Empire State Building has disappeared and there's no way for her to understand which way is north and which way is south, which is, 9/11. Buildings that used to be there are gone. There are Nazis burning, Nazis attacking homeless people all over the place. There is a woman in furs who has extended the limit on her credit card debt. And now the secret police are after her. She figures prominently in the next moment. And Marisol teams up with a ragtag bunch of misfits to try to get to June. Meanwhile, the war in the heavens is going on and Marisol is aware she doesn't want to join the battle against God because she has faith and she's Catholic and she doesn't want to be part of an uprising. Let me just see if there's anything. I'm just going to read the last part. What ends up happening is they're finally reunited. June gets her memory back and humanity is called on to join the fight. And just as the play ends, the woman in furs confronts Marisol because she is resistant to change. And there's a flash of light. And Marisol is shot. And this is her final monologue. And I want to acknowledge the double pandemic that we're living through and also acknowledge that we have our first woman of color on the national ticket. And I want to acknowledge that I want to acknowledge the crisis that we are in this country, and draw from the magic that Jose Rivera created. Marisol, she says, I'm killed instantly. Little blazing lead meteors enter my body. My blood cells ride those bullets into outer space. My soul surges up oceans of the Milky Way at the speed of light. At the moment of death, I see the invisible war. Thousands of years of fighting pass in an instant. New and terrible forms of warfare, monstrous weapons, and unimaginable strains of terror are created and destroyed in billionths of a second. Galaxies spring from a single drop of angels' sweat, while hundreds of armies fight and die on the fingertips of children in the Bronx. Lights upstage reveal the angel. She is dressed in a filthy, tattered uniform. The war has ravaged her. She has a huge, magnificent wings, her wings of war. She has an Uzi machine gun. The angel fires her gun into the air, at the invisible legions of God's loyal warriors. A spotlight on Marisol. 300 million beautiful angels die in the first charge of the final battle. The oceans are salty with rebel blood. Angels drop like lightning from the dying sky. The rebels are in full retreat. There's chaos, there's blood and fire and ambulances, and heaven's soldiers scream and fight and die in beautiful, beautiful light. It looks like the revolution is doomed. A light up stage reveals a single homeless person angrily throwing rocks at the sky. Then, as if one body, one mind, the innocent of the earth take to the streets with anything they can find, rocks and sticks and screams, and aim their displeasure at the senile sky and fire into the tattered wind on the side of the angels. Billions of poor, of homeless, of peaceful, of silent, of angry, fighting and fighting as no species has ever fought before. Inspired by the earthly noise, the rebels advance. A small moon appears in the sky. New ideas rip the heavens. New powers are created. New miracles are signed into law. It's the first day of the new history. There's a few seconds of tremendous noise as the war hits its climax, then silence. The angel appears next to Marisol, wingless, unarmed, holding a gold crown in her hands. The angel holds the crown out to the audience as Marisol looks at her. Oh God, what light, what possibilities, what hope. The angel kisses Marisol. Bright light shines directly into the audience's eyes for several seconds. And Marisol and Angel and June and the homeless people are turned into light. They seem to disappear in the wild light of the new millennium. Blackout. End of play. So that's my favorite play right now. Oh my God, it's so good. Okay, we're so, like, this is late. We're so, oh my God, it's so late. Okay, Wayne, what do you want to do?
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a really quick question for the two of you, and I do want to invite people, if you'd like to pose a question to Matthew and Melinda, why don't you open up the chat and let me know you have a question. Just say, I'll see your name and I'll ask you to unmute yourself and ask the question. But let me pose a quick question to the two of you to give everyone else a chance to think if they've got a question. I was struck, you two both spoke about the same thing, but the choice of language was very odd. And I wondered, was it just accident or something revealing? So Matthew, you talked about for the artist having their voice. And you're talking about, in this case, in both cases, it was sculpture, but we're talking about things that you see. The playwright says, the question is, do you have a vision? So you're actually choosing something visual. Pure accident, or what's going on there?
Maybe vision is too pompous, or maybe vision is the wrong, I don't know. Is vision the right thing? Is it too full of itself? What do you think?
Well, I think I marvel, Wayne, at now in modern times, we don't think anything of people having a sense of their individuality and their voice. But to think about when those works of art were made, the Etruscan, 2,400 years ago, and even the Madonna almost 1,000 years ago, that concept of the individual, I didn't really exist. And that the artists, that they were making choices, and like I said, obviously aware of the choices that they made and the effect that they would have. And that's what I mean by the artist's voice. And it was such a I believe, such a foreign concept at that point in time. Now we just take it for granted that, you know, that we're individuals and that we all have a voice, and it's remarkable to me. Both of those artists were so far ahead of their times. I mean, it's those, and have to understand also that those objects are in the museum and they exist because other people have recognized that in them through all of time, that they've been taken care of, that they've been prized, and that they exist in that setting because that there has been that recognition of them throughout all of time. And that's what I'm referring to. I think Melinda is talking about, you know, the artist in the present, in contemporary times, and they're very, that voice, although the concept of the artist making choices that, you know, that they convey to the audience is the same. In contemporary times, it's just sort of taken for granted that exists, and I think that's sort of the difference, that the difference between a choice and the vision. The vision.
Well, and this is a great thing too, which is the museum is full of art that has stood the test of time, right? But new plays aren't. New plays have not stood the test of time. They're speaking to the moment that we're living in, and there's an immediacy to that is also worth engaging with. We don't know what work from this decade will still be taught or read or produced in 100 years. And there's just an interesting conversation going back and forth about that. An artist or a craftsperson working now, right? You want to make the most beautiful and suitable chair that you can, and you want to put you want to put yourself into the craft or the play, like, right? Playwright is W-R-I-G-H-T, which is, there's a craft in it. It's like the shipwright or the wheelwright, which I always think is interesting. Writing is like making a beautiful table or building a house. I think that it's got an interesting crossover with LexArt, right? Because you're talking about making things that are beautiful and also utilitarian and crafted. So are you going to use this play now? That's the kind of thing I'm thinking of. Like, what use is the theater right now? And that's something we're all going to struggle with for a little while. Like, what's going to get us back into the theater? What's going to get us back into the museum? What do we need to draw from these works of art?
Well, let me maybe invite the two of you to talk about this, to me, a fascinating dichotomy. You talk about, okay, the immediacy of the play, and then with those two sarcophagi, I'm sorry, the two pieces of sculpture, the intimacy of them. They're not trying, yes, a sarcophagus is art to last. And so there were some long-term aspirations for why the piece was made, yet the message itself, in both cases, is the most intimate and personal, and is not trying to make some grandiose statement. But it stands the test of time because it is so deeply human. And same thing, okay, Taming of the Shrew, the start of your relationship, Shakespeare, touching on very, very human, recognizable emotions, so that, you know, we're still reading it hundreds of years later, and it speaks to cultures all around the world. So how does that
as an artist, how do you make those choices about, do I make the grandiose statement or do I go to the deeply personal?
I think I was thinking about the sarcophagus, and I made a statement in my presentation about Vishnu, the wife, looking at the husband, but the husband was looking, sort of partially looking at her and partially looking off into the distance. And I said it was devastatingly profound, but I didn't explain that. So let me explain it now. And I think that it answers your question, that is both a statement about the personal and the human condition in general. One is, I think that it generally represents the relationship of the genders. She's looking at him and he's only partially looking at her and partially looking off into the distance. I think it's also deeply personal. I think he was older than her by quite a bit. This is just my own interpretation. And that when I look at that image of them, I feel like either he's searching for a memory, he's trying to recall a memory for her, or she's asked him a question and he's searching for the answer. And he can't find the answer looking directly at her. He sort of has to look off, meaning he's older, he's begun to lose it a little. She's right there. She's looking directly at him. And again, I feel like it's both speaks about, the role of the genders, but also about their particular relationship. And that's the case in all of art, and Melinda's talked about that many times in her writing, which is, if you write about the deeply personal, right, then it does describe the human condition. It does speak it speaks to everyone. If you can describe it, if you can articulate it eloquently enough and make it plain enough for others to read, then you can turn the personal into the universal.
But that's the question too, right? If there's a question at the heart, that it invites the audience, whether it's a visual or you're in the theater, it invites the spectator into the work, as opposed to screaming, "This is my manifesto," right? "This is my TED Talk. This is my TED Talk," right? It's not a TED Talk. There has to be space for an audience member or an auditor to imagine themselves, right? That's what theater, offering the experience of empathy and compassion for people or characters that you would never come across, or situations that you might never find yourself in, but you can enter into it and feel like there's something like me in this experience, right? Because at our heart, it's so interesting that you see that, like, it is the gender thing, totally. Like, I'm gazing at you, and right, and that's thousands of years old, right? What is there? Oh, I just did something terrible. I don't believe in institutionalized misogyny. And I don't think that women always look at men. That's awful. But I found myself looking at my husband while he was talking. So there you go. Maybe that's a marriage. Maybe that's a hetero, cis normative marriage relationship. I don't know. I'll put that out there as a question.
Let me I think we've got time to take one question. And Christine Doucette, if you're, I see you're still there. Could you pose you put a question in the chat. If you mind, why don't you just say it out directly?
Sometimes we talk about art and it just always seems like there's a big capital A in art. And it seems like both of you are sort of talking about sort of the quotidien, the everyday, and that's where we find it and we live it in a certain way. And I know that when I look at the pieces that you were talking about, Matthew, and of course Melinda's art, the theater, it just seems like finding, as you were talking about, in fact, the universal in the everyday. It's just an observation in a certain way. Do you find that to be true?
And that's what Melinda was talking about with the magical realism, right? Which is, we're just people are just describing the everyday, but it's fantastic at the same time. It can be, and it is, if you allow it to be, if you're open to it. And,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Absolutely.
We just happen to be more open. We happen to be more open to it when we walk into the museum or we step into the theater, but we need to be open to it all the time, just walking down the block of our own street. And right, that's what you're saying, the everyday.
I also wanted to say, I was going to ask a question of Melinda, but I'll just make a comment, which is that I remember going to see an early play, God Smells Like a Roast Pig. And the second I heard that title, I thought, I know exactly what she's talking about before I even, right? It's like that, you know. I live in the neighborhood that my grandparents lived in. And when I walk past that house,
Yeah.
there's a visual, there's a sort of an aesthetic that I just can't escape.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and it touches your humanity, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Every
It really
time.
does.
Yeah.
Thank you, John and Christine.
Thank you. Great to see you.
You too.
Good job.
I'll make some quick closing remarks, but I would also say we'll leave this open, and if people want to chat and continue the conversation, why not? You know, it's just like you know, exiting the theater or the museum. You can keep on talking. So let me just close by thanking Matthew and Melinda. This was a wonderful, fascinating conversation, and we look forward to lots more with both of you. I thank all of our audience for joining us. Invite you to come back again on Thursday, September 17th, when we have Jody Colella, another of our LexArt members, actually a newcomer who has just joined in the last year and is leading our Weaving and Fiber Arts Guild, and her artistic partner, Meryl Camo, another Bedford native, continuing our string, which was not planned this way, but just coincidence of great Bedford artists. And then following that, we've got great programs through the rest of the year. In October, a cartoonist, Susie Becker and Hillary Price. Some more playwrights in November, Bundy Boynton and Woodworth, and then the great musicians, Billy Novick and Guy Van Duzer in December. We do hope, we've got more things happening online, and we'll be announcing more with LexArt through the rest of the fall, including more classes, and our holiday marketplace will be back both physically and online, and we hope people will be able to join us for that. And finally, I would ask, I won't be shy about it, we are in a pandemic. We can use all the help that we can get. So if you've enjoyed the show and would like to help us out, you can visit our website, www.lexart.org, and go to the donate tab, and we'd be grateful for anything you'd like to contribute. And with that, I'll close it up. But as I said, if people would like to stay on Zoom and keep chatting, certainly welcome to have you enjoy yourselves. Thank you and good night.
Good night. Thank you. I dropped in the chat a link to Dream Boston, which is the short audio plays that we're producing at the Huntington Theater. They're 5 to 6 minutes long, and they're set in the post-pandemic future. What local playwrights imagine is what we imagine our future might be in Boston. So Dream Boston is on the website. You can go and download. There's 4 episodes up now. There will be 10 by September 1st, and they're free, so you can listen to them.
Oh, and there was, I did see one question in the chat. Yes, we do. We now have a YouTube channel, and we will make this recording available. Some people came in late, so you'll be able to catch the beginning. And also, you'll be able to enjoy the wonderful talk we had last month with the Gould family.
Oh, so good. That was so good.
It was a
We'll
lot of
stay
fun.
on if anyone wants to continue. We're not going anywhere. Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you. Thank you. I had a lot more questions for the two of you.
Well, keep going.
So,
My question,
okay, yeah, sure. Someone else has a question? You want to
Linda,
pop in?
my question is, what is your next work that's going to be performed?
Well, I'm working on a new play for Central Square Theater that is based on interviews with scientists of color. Right now, the working title is Young Nerds of Color, and it looks at both exceptional individuals in science and also bias in science. When that will be performed is harder to predict.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, we will have a vaccine by next fall, and our seasons will be back. But that is one of the projects I'm working on right now, and that is a different kind of project for me because it's entirely interview based. So all of the text comes from conversations with these just remarkable astrophysicists, medical researchers, people who are growing, people who are figuring out how we can grow our own organs. We can grow our own kidneys to replace failing organs, rocket scientists, and all people coming from underrepresented backgrounds. So I'm very excited about that piece.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else have any questions you wanted to ask?
Yeah. I wanted to ask Matthew if the presentation of the sarcophagi in their horizontal position changes the aesthetic. I mean, we saw them the way the sculptor would, but not the way a viewer at the time or museum goer would. Does that change anything?
That's an interesting, it's an interesting discussion because they were made for a tomb. They were really never meant to be seen. The last director, Malcolm Rogers, wanted to stand the lids up, separate them from the sarcophagus and stand the lids up. It's difficult because they look best, the figures look best, I think, in the way the slides were presented, where the shot is viewed from above, whereas that's not the way you view them as you're questioning. That's not the way that you see them. You sort of see them from the side, a little bit above them, standing up. But I had suggested that they actually make a viewing platform that you could walk up a series of steps, right, if you wanted to, so that you could view them from above or go back down to the floor and view them from the side, so you had the option of both. But the fact is that they were never meant to be seen. They were in tombs. So, I mean, I don't know how to answer the question except to say that it's all sort of a construct because, you know, they were buried. It's the same with all the Egyptian material too, right? It only exists because it was buried. You know, it was only dug up in the mid 19th century. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have survived.
Oh, thanks.
So Matthew, my question for you is, okay, so you love these objects. You go back and visit them. They're your old friends.
Old friends, that's right.
How do they inspire you? Where do they emerge in things you're making, things you're doing, whatever? How on a day-to-day practical level, how do they influence your life?
I find them both so incredibly moving, Wayne. And what I didn't really talk about, which is what I feel, even without what I'm about to say, the artists who made them, their virtuosity would be intact. But the fact that they built a sort of dynamism into them, the sarcophagus is the easier one, which is it's dynamic. Not only is it intimate and tender, but it's dynamic because of the difference in the gaze, because she looks at him and he looks off at 3/4. And that tension, that difference, that dynamism is what really sets that piece apart. And I feel the same with the Madonna, which is the combination of love and loss together that are represented. And I feel that every great work of art needs to have that. I call it a tension. It isn't necessarily a tension, it's a dynamism where there are opposing forces or forces that are not at rest. And I always strive for that in everything that I do, which is to move away from the static. And that's what I find. That's why I return to them. That's what moves me so much, is that dynamism. It wouldn't be enough just the virtuosity of being able to render the figures as they were. It's the dynamism created by the offsetting powers. If you look, we both love the work of Caravaggio, and that sort of opposition of forces, it can be represented in so many ways. It doesn't have to be an emotion, as those, as in the Madonna or in the glance, in the composition that way. It can be in color. It can be in other form. It's in paintings. Caravaggio, it's just fantastic. There's a crucifixion at the Vatican, I think, right? Is it a crucifixion? There's always a dynamism taking place that makes those paintings so great.
And feet.
And feet.
He's always got feet, right?
But that's the inspiration that I draw. I mean, I feel it's not enough for an object to simply be beautiful. If it's static, it doesn't matter. There has to be a dynamism to it.
Great. That's.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. Thank you. It was great to have a chance to talk about these ideas and passions.
Great. Well, thank you. Anyone else have anything they want to say?
Thank you so much.
How are we doing?
Okay.
We still have 19 people on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
All right. We love LexArt. Bye.
Bye, you guys.
Thank you. Take care.